On this episode of Watch Stuff with Us, we are breaking down a few of the major players in the Jeffrey Dahmer story on Netflix. What is up, everyone? I am JD, and today we are going to be talking about a few of the major characters from Netflix's number one show. I can't talk. Netflix's number one show, Monster: The Jeffrey Dahmer Story. If you like what we're doing on this channel, be sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell so that you are notified each and every time we are live or drop a video. Right now, we're live. If you're watching this after the fact, we aren't live, obviously. But as we go, we will be dropping the comments that we have from people in the chat. So without further ado, let's get started. Real quick, let's discuss Lionel Dahmer first, who is Jeffrey Dahmer's father. For me, after Jeff, this show was primarily about Lionel. And you got the most of his backstory. You got how he felt about things, probably more so than anybody else on the entire show. Like at certain points, I felt that the show was sort of from his perspective, from the outside looking in, and it was interesting to watch his sort of journey of realization of what he had in a son. His sort of stages, almost like stages of grief. Like he went through the whole denial phase where, oh, he's just a curious kid, all the way through to the end to sort of acceptance. And then at the very end, he was almost, or at least the show made it seem like he was profiting or trying to profit off of Jeff and everything that happened. So Vernon had a question. I wonder if the show is autobiographical or recreation based on real events. From what I understand, the show is based on true events. They've taken some liberties here and there, and we'll talk about that a little bit later because I have an article that discusses that and a video that discusses that as well. But from what I understand, they did take some liberties in making this an entertainment show and not a documentary. So yeah, it wasn't exactly 100% the way that everything went down, I'm sure. And they have some creative license that they took, but I believe that most of the show is true, that these things definitely went down the way that they went down. I think there was some embellishment and maybe some, theatrics placed in it, but on a whole, yeah, definitely was legitimately a show and legitimately based off real events. But yeah, getting back to Lionel. If you're in the chat, what do you think of him? But yeah, like I said, I really think that he was the true focus of the show. And really, you have to wonder how much of what he did and the way that he raised Jeff, how much of that contributed to Jeff turning into the person that he turned into. Because early on in the series, you could see Jeff as a child, and he was around his mom and dad, who seemed like they argued a lot, did not get along very well. Didn't seem like there was a ton of violence overall, but there was a lot of arguing and threats of violence. Like there was that one part in one of the episodes where the mom had a knife and pulled a knife on Lionel. So those sort of threats of violence had to have some sort of impact on how Jeff was raised and Jeff's development of who he was. Also, we have to get into the whole roadkill thing and how Lionel had, I guess he was trying to find a common ground with his son. And most of us would pick something like, sports or, TV or movies or, art, music, cooking. something that is more traditional, let's say. But I guess his son was inquisitive, and they found a sort of common ground at dissecting roadkill. So you have to wonder if that sort of that the feelings that he ended up having later on in his life, if they came from his wanting to connect and remember those good times that he had with his dad. At least that was one of my theories. That was one of my theories. Andrea says, I feel like Lionel had a lot to do with it. Yeah, I do too. I do too. I really do. I feel like he either knowingly or unknowingly molded Jeff into the person that he became, or at least played a large part in molding him into the person that he became. And we haven't even talked about how Lionel discussed at the end how he was having feelings of wanting to harm people, and he was able to, suppress those things and keep himself from succumbing to some of the same urges that I bet Jeff had. So some of that stuff isn't just what Jeff picked up from Lionel and the times that they had. It was stuff that was, chemically passed down to him as well, I'm guessing. Because as you know, mental health can definitely be passed down from your parents, or mental health issues can be passed down from your parents. Katie says, I feel that he failed as a father and should take a great amount of accountability for how Jeff turned out. Once everything was brought to light, he did. However, he had plenty of opportunities prior. Yeah, he did have a lot of opportunities. And I felt that he was in denial for a very long time. He really, 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 I don't know if he intentionally didn't see it, but he didn't acknowledge it. And he didn't want to take any onus in what happened with Jeff, especially during that time period when Jeff committed his first murder, when Jeff really felt alone. And that was one of the recurring themes of the show, was that Jeff stating that he was alone and that he didn't have anybody. So maybe if his dad was there, it would have prevented Jeff from making that first murder where he picked up the hitchhiker and then took him to his house and ended up, in a fit of rage, hitting him with the weight and, and eventually killing him. Vernon says, I didn't see it yet. However, I saw a documentary that stated his parents moved out and left him. Yep, just discussed that. Just discussed that. And if you haven't seen it, man, I really appreciate you for watching us right now. But we are going to totally ruin everything if you haven't seen it yet. So just be warned that we're going to talk about everything. And if you're cool with that, cool. And I mean, you probably, since you saw the documentary, you probably seen, the gist of the story. But I would definitely, if you have time, go back and watch it. It was definitely entertaining. In an interesting way, it was entertaining, not in a traditional, like, man, that was a really good show. Like, no, it wasn't entertaining like that. It was more thought provoking and interesting to watch as it unfolded. Andrew says, exactly. Yes, exactly. Stevia says, maybe it's just fictionalized, but Lionel expressing his murder fantasies and regretting not doing more taxidermy. Well, I just can't feel sorry for him. I think as a father, I feel sorry for him in that watching your offspring fail and fail in the most spectacular fashion reflects on you as a parent. And I don't necessarily think that he was a bad man, but a lot of his actions did directly lead to Jeff being the person that he was. And I wouldn't put that on anybody to feel like, or to have them deal with having a child who did the things that Jeff did. So to that degree, I do feel sorry for him. I feel like there are so many things that he could have done to make the to make Jeff a better person, or at least attempt to. I would like to know what Lionel's parents did for Jeff. Like, how was his mom? And I know we saw her later on in the series, but like, how was he raised? Because I wondered if it was their intervention that kept Lionel at the point where he was only had the urges inside and didn't act on them. So maybe if Lionel had been a better parent, he could have kept Jeff. Jeff wouldn't have felt like he needed to act on these urges. He would have been able to suppress them the way that Lionel did. I don't know, just theory. Katie says Jeff was most definitely born to fight a tough battle in life with both his mother and his father's mental health traits passed on to him. But you can rise above those traits. You don't have to go dark. Yeah, that's true. That's true. You can rise above. I wonder sometimes if Jeff was able to or felt comfortable enough verbalizing that he was having these issues, if he was able to explain that he was having these problems. I really don't feel that he had many opportunities to do so. And I think that's part of it. That's part of the problem. When your parents aren't there or when they're arguing when they are there, as a child and as a young child, you don't really feel comfortable enough to jump in and say, like, hey, this is my problem. This is where I'm struggling, when there's just struggle all around you to begin with. So yeah, I can kind of think that that's really difficult for him to have found a spot to do that, and especially if he already felt like he was struggling big time, and being that young, it had to be hard to verbalize that and get that out. If you're just tuning in, we are talking about Lionel right now, Jeff's father, and just sort of a character breakdown. Let's call it that. Stevia says, "Yeah, I can see that, but what? But what?" I know, Stevia. It's hard to find sympathy for that family. Yeah, that was one thing that I did a lot of during the show, was that I went back and forth from empathy to sympathy to flat out having none of that and saying, "Oh, you guys were just the worst." And like I said in one of the reaction videos, that is a mark of a good show and good directors and good actors and good writers, that you can have so many different feelings throughout the show. And it was it was a roller coaster when it came to those feelings and trying to resolve in my head, what was going on. Because the first thing that you want to do when you watch something or when you read something or when you interact with something is that, and it's a bad situation, is that you want to place blame somewhere. And I felt that this show had so much blame to go around that it was hard to determine how you felt about each individual character, which is why I wanted to break them down tonight. Stevie or Andrea says, so true. And Jeff did what he did. He's ultimately to blame here. They kept blinders on, though, ignored all the red flags. You got that right. They ignored, or at least this portrayal of them showed them ignoring so many red flags. So many red flags that you think, like, how could you ignore that? And they had many opportunities to get him the help that he needed, that it was sad that it took Jeff going to jail the first time, or the county the first time, and his dad writing that letter and saying that Jeff needed some alcohol treatment, which, that was such an excuse to begin with saying that, oh, he has an alcohol problem. No, he has problems that are far greater than being an alcoholic. And it it sucked that it took Lionel even that long to realize that I need to reach out to somebody to get him help. And another thing that the show sort of shined a light on was that the prison system isn't the place to really get help. There are some prison facilities that give people the help that they need to make them better, but the prison system isn't really in the business of rehabilitating people, even though that's what they're supposed to be in the business for. They are housing people only. And you sort of sit there and do your time. This has come from somebody who's never been in jail, prison, anything like that. But from the way I understand it, and the way Jeff talked about it afterwards, was that being alone was probably the best part about it, and being there with his thoughts, because obviously nobody was talking to him or trying to help him process things or get him treatment. It definitely wasn't a treatment facility, and that's really what he needed. And it's sad that even at that point in time, it was probably too late, probably far too late to get him the help that he needed. Have a sip of my drinky drink real quick. Vernon, maybe my perspective is a little off, but I thought better of Lionel when Jeff was interviewed in prison and his dad was right there next to him. He didn't duck and run. Yeah, I think that some of the overtones that I got in the show was that his dad kind of enjoyed the spotlight a little bit, and I think that, and see, this is the part where I don't know if that's true or not, or if that was just something that they played up for the show. I would like to think that he was there to support him. I would like to think that he was there trying to be a good dad, but the show kind of put it in my head that, man, maybe he was there because he knew that he was eventually going to write a book, and him sort of presenting himself to the world was going to help sell copies of the book. And obviously the book was not successful. If you watch the show, you can see the book wasn't successful. And I do find it kind of appalling to try to profit in any way off of the heinous acts that his son did. But yeah, he didn't duck and run. I do give him credit for that, to some degree. To some degree. Katie says, exactly. It was frustrating when he did try and reach out, especially in the diner, when his father totally brushed the convo aside and pushed him off to college. His father always changed the subject. Yes, he did. And it's hard to watch because you can see, like you said, you could see Jeff sort of reaching out and wanting that help, and wanting and sort of wanting to not only be held accountable, but to stop. There were portions in that story, I believe, that Jeff was recoverable as a person, but by the end, no, definitely not. And the times when he was recoverable, I think, were the times before his first murder, and then that, especially that 3 month period where he was by himself. If somebody could have intervened at that point, maybe they could have kept him from going off the deep end. And when he was a child. Stevia agrees with Andrea. Stevia says the police need to be held accountable. We will get into the whole police situation later on, but yeah, they definitely need to be held accountable. That was the negligence on their part, was something that beyond frustrated me while watching. And it sort of mirrors society the way it is now. And you kind of feel like, or at least for me, I wondered if they had thought about, like, man, we're gonna put this in there because of the current climate that we live in, and the way that the the black community's relationship with the police has eroded even further than it has at that point. And it just goes to show that, that relationship that the black community has had with the police maybe has gotten a little bit better at this point in time, but it definitely was not very much. It definitely didn't get to the point where those underserved communities felt comfortable and the police that they had, and that those people were there to help them, which is horrible. But we're going to talk more about the police a little bit later. Andrea says, I don't want to feel like that either, but I mean, the first thing he did when all this happened was write a book. I remember when all this happened and the book came out, I was like, really? Yeah. I don't remember it. I think I was like 13 or 14 at the time. So I don't really remember it clearly. I remember Jeff and people talking. I remember his name and I remember what had happened and I remember how he died, but I don't remember anything about the book or anything like that. But yeah, the book is a bad look, a bad look, and it makes me like I understand how cathartic it was for him to write out everything. I think, but he should have kept that book to himself. Like you can write your book, just you don't need to publish it and try to sell it because then you change the entire perception of it and you look like you're just trying to come up, which was not good. Not good. Andrea also says, so true, Stevia. Oh man, it was disgusting. And I think that's in reference to the police being held accountable. So yeah, they definitely do need to be held accountable. And it was really gross seeing the cops that didn't do anything about the 14-year old child getting awarded for as police officers of the year after they had been suspended and had returned from their suspension. That was hard to watch, but sadly enough, not shocking, not shocking, which is it just shows you the state of police and our lack of confidence in them at this point, that it wasn't shocking. If that happened today, it wouldn't shock me. It happened then, didn't shock me. It's just like, dang, that's sad. So I think we did enough talk on Lionel. Let's move on to his mom, Catherine. Catherine, I think, definitely had severe mental issues, which prevented her from being the best parent that she could be. That being said, to abandon your son the way that she did, she has to take blame just as much as Lionel does for the way that Jeff turned out. And like I said, I don't really like placing blame in this situation because I feel like there's so much blame to go around. But and I feel that she was so impaired that she probably couldn't. Maybe she was doing the best that she could. It showed early on that she had a lot of postpartum depression. Even when she was pregnant, she just wanted the pregnancy to be over. She took tons of medication. Like there's so many different things that could have turned Jeff into who he was and who he turned out to be. And it's really sad. But in her case, yeah, maybe she first off instead of being able to help Jeff, maybe she could have sought out the help that she needed. And then when she was able to get herself together, she would have been able to filter that down and get Jeff together. It seemed like she needed to be like almost like an intervention though. And it didn't really seem like Lionel was into that. He was more so into blaming and he was off the scene a lot. And I'm sure that might have been for his sanity, but it definitely didn't do any favors to her or to Jeff in the end. Stevia says, if it's correct, Netflix didn't contact the families before the show, and they are now suing for damages, which they should if that's the case. Um, yeah, yeah, they definitely should be suing if they weren't contacted. I also think that it's hard when you are trying to produce something that's entertainment to to be in contact with all the parties involved. If you're going to portray someone in a show, I think that they need to be compensated for that. Whether they have a part in the direction of the show or not, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but they should definitely be compensated for everything that they should be compensated because they were displayed in the show. Definitely should be compensated for that. Andrea says they gave that baby back to him and he died. Yeah, yeah, yep. So sad. Kay says, "Oh wow, Stevia. If that's the case, Netflix messed up." Yeah, and I mean, I understand a little bit about how the entertainment business works, and it can be a greedy, bad business for people when you have a situation like this, where it's already a touchy subject, and you are trying to profit off of it. So yeah, they definitely should be compensated for their stories being told in the manner that they were told. Um, and wow, we got some spam in the chat. That's awesome. That means we must have really hit like the big time if we got spam in the chat. All right, but yeah, Catherine was definitely not my favorite character in the show. Like there was a little soft spot, I think, for Lionel. And I don't know if that's because I'm a guy and I could relate to the whole father thing, but yeah, I definitely know that Catherine didn't really get that soft spot from me. And the one redeeming quality that I can say about her was that she at the end stood up for the fact that she did not want Jeff's brain, or no, actually she did. She wanted his brain to be like um dissected, which was interesting. And that was another point in the story that I was kind of surprised about. Like I didn't know that fact that there was a little bit of a battle over whether they were gonna, try to figure out what was going on. And I give her credit. Like I personally I would want answers too if there was a situation like that. I would want to know if scientists or anything could figure out exactly what was going on and why he was the way he was. But I do understand the point that the show is making too, is that if you continue to try to find these answers, it's just going to lead you down a path of more questions. So I get that too. Yeah, Catherine did wrong the whole time. Yeah, she kind of did. She kind of did. I think the brain needed to go. Oh man! So if we were in that courtroom, we would have been on opposite sides too. So yeah, I mean, I can understand either way. And then I mean, with the brain being gone or being disposed of, that was what Jeff wanted. Jeff wanted to have his entire body, destroyed. So how much of that do you should come into play too? This person who's done all these horrible things should he be able to choose what happens to his body in the end when he made the choice for so many other people and desecrated their bodies and defiled their bodies in countless horrible ways? At the end of the day, should he even be able to choose, what happens to his body? So, all right. Well, let's do another character real quick, and that is Glinda Cleveland, who is portrayed as being the neighbor who lived next door to him. From an article that I read, who, if we have a little time, we'll talk about that too. But an article that I read said that she actually didn't even live in the apartment next to him. She lived in a complex, sort of like across from across the street from him. So like she wasn't even in the same building. But I guess they sort of needed a almost like a hero type character in this story. And I know that she was the one who was there and called the police initially. So it did make sense. Well, initially when he had the 14-year-old boy. So I guess it did make sense to make her a little bit more intimately tied to the actual story. But yeah, I guess it does make sense. But then you get into the whole like embellishment of the story and stuff too. So, which isn't exactly cool. But Glenda, yeah, she was an interesting character. I kind of feel as though she tried her best to get things to happen and let people know that there were things going on that were completely horrible, inappropriate. So yeah, that's rough. Oh, real quick, Dave, what is up, man? Long time no speak, man. I hope all is well in your world. Dave is a former I guess I can call it, I guess, coworker. Yeah, would it be kind of coworker? But yeah, he me and Dave got to hang out a lot. He is a great person, and we work together at Arrowhead Ranch out here in the Quad Cities. So big shout out to Dave, man. Thanks for dropping in, sir. Um, but yeah, Glenda. Back to Glenda. Um, I kind of felt the way they portrayed Glinda on the show after the fact um was a little annoying too, in that, and I'm sure this is just for the show, and I don't know how Glinda actually felt about things, but they kind of made it like the Glinda show and like how affected she was by everything, and they told her story a lot. And I don't know if that was on purpose or not. Like, was she really that type of person, or is that just the way they portrayed her? I know one thing that was a point of contention when we were recording the show was if Glenda should have moved. And if financially it was feasible for her to do so, I think she should have. That makes me wonder why she didn't if that was the case. But odds are, if she was in those apartments to begin with, she did not have very much money. We also discussed how or we had a commenter who said like, it's expensive to break leases, and if you don't have a lot of money to be able to pay for that, you're kind of stuck. And in this situation, she definitely was stuck, or at least that's the way it seemed. She was definitely stuck, and i I definitely felt sorry for her. It has to be beyond frustrating to continually report to the police or whoever that this is going on and nobody is doing anything about it. And you're constantly seeing all of these guys go in there, and eventually you don't see them again. Especially when it happened with her neighbor, and the I I don't know if they just did it for the show or not, but I was sort of yelling at the TV saying, why didn't she tell him not to like mess with this dude? Like, if I saw anybody and they were moving in, or like if I had a creepy neighbor or something right now, and the person who just moved into the neighborhood came over and talked to me, and if I knew that this neighbor was like super creepy, I would have been like, hey, don't mess with those people across the street. You see that house over there? Yeah, don't mess with them, because they're weird. If they ask you anything, you just keep going the other direction. You don't want to have any parts of what they got going on. So I definitely would have done that. Like, there's no way that I would have let something like that go down. So I wonder if in real life, in reality, if she did tell him something, but he did still have those conversations with him. The most, I guess, like, I don't want to say funny per se, but The most inadvertently funny part of this show was Glenda's conversation with Jeff in Glenda's apartment and the sandwich. Now I have to know, somebody has to be able to figure out if that part with Jeff trying to give her the sandwich was real. I really hope that was real. I really do. And Jeff's description of the sandwich as being pulled pork. Oh, that was great. There's no way. First off, I don't know how she let him in her apartment. Like, if I knew that this dude was, or I thought that this dude was killing people, I'm not gonna invite them in. No way. First off, no way. Second, once he comes in, yeah, I'm with her. There's no way I'm eating anything that this dude is giving up. Anything. I don't care what it is. It could have been the best looking sandwich that anybody has ever made. If it's coming from him in that apartment, nope. Nope. I don't eat at everybody's house right now. Like, I will easily go over to somebody's house, and if I see something that's looking a little dirty or a little unsanitary, nah, I'm not touching it. I'm not touching it. I don't want any of your food. And that's why I'm pretty meticulous about my house. And like, we have pets. So like, I have to make sure that the pet hair is clean, because if somebody's gonna come over to my house and eat something, I don't want them looking like, ooh, there's hair everywhere over here, because that is disgusting. But yeah. So one other thing about that, and like I said, I don't know if it played out this way or not, but Jeff's sort of like insistence on her eating the sandwich, that would have instantly made me be like, nope, not touching this thing. If anybody, like, if I go over to somebody's house and they give me a drink or something like that, like, I'm drinking a little something right here. Let me take a little swig real quick. But if somebody told me like, hey man, I got you this drink, drink it real quick, just drink it. Man, yeah, it's real good. Just drink it, try it. Oh, you not tried it yet, man? Drink it. Come on, you gotta try this. It's so good. Try it, man. Do it right now. Drink it. If somebody is that insistent on me doing almost anything, I'm not gonna do it. No way. No way. So yeah, when he was like sliding the sandwich over and told her to eat it, no, no, Jeff. You need to get out of my house too. Because there's no way. I like, yeah, if Glenda is who she was dumb for even letting him come into her house. She was dumb. That should have never happened. Never happened. But yeah, when he's trying to force a sandwich, you're not gonna force me to eat anything. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Let's get to the comments real quick. Katie, right? If she actually did keep going to his door and chatting with him, she was either fearless or had a death wish. You got that right. There was no way, no way, no way that I would have been going to this person's house for anything ever. It would have been my goal to just call the police every day. That's about it. Nothing more, nothing less. I looked it up. He did try feeding sandwiches to neighbors. Oh no. So that's real. Mm. We released a short video on our channel earlier in the week that was a clip of us discussing if you would eat the Jeff Dahmer sandwich. So, everybody in the chat right now, or if you're watching this after the fact, in the comments right now, would you eat the Jeff Dahmer sandwich if he just passed you that plate? It didn't look bad. Like, it looked like, I don't know if it didn't look like pulled pork to me. It looked like chicken maybe. But would you eat the Jeff Dahmer sandwich? Andrea says, yep, Katie. Yep. So I guess that is legit scary. Katie says, heck no. He didn't even add barbecue sauce. Nah, he had no sauce. It was a dry sandwich. It takes so much for me to not curse on here. And I know I can, but I like to make this channel and this show something that if you were watching this in the background with your kids there, that it will be okay and they're not cursing every 2 seconds. So but yeah, heck no, I'm not eating a sandwich. And yeah, he didn't have barbecue sauce. It doesn't matter what was on that sandwich. If Jeff made it and it came from him, I got nothing for it. I can't do it. Can't do it. Andrea says, no thanks, I'm good. Yeah. You're smart, Andrea. You're very smart. Please, if you're in that situation where you have a serial killer or a potential serial killer come to your house and offer you some food, don't do it. And he was just like frying up like body parts like they were steak. Like I didn't know which part that was. It just showed him in the frying pan that he had. But the weird the funniest part to me was him like pouring the olive oil in the pan beforehand. I was like, this dude is like seriously trying to chef this stuff up, and he's about to eat like a human heart or a lung or some sort of human meat, meat. Stevia says the convo between Glenda and the police regarding the 14-year-old was pulled straight from the transcript. Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. It is. Well, it's awesome that they pulled it directly from there and that they were portraying that straight up. Like that's so sad, man. It's so sad. I couldn't imagine how it would feel to know that something bad is happening and so helpless that you can't do anything. You can't do anything about it. Yeah. Kay says I'm a vegetarian. Yeah. Yeah, I'd definitely be a vegetarian at that point in time. I'm not eating your sandwich, Jeff. No matter what you say, no matter what you got, I'm not eating the sandwich. Andrew's laughing. All right. So we dealt with Glenda. We dealt with Catherine, the mom. We dealt with Lionel, the father. And last but not least, let's do a little bit of a deep dive into Jeff. I think the big question is, and I want to ask everybody in the chat right now, or in the comments after the fact, do you feel like you should be, or were you sympathetic to Jeff in his situation, or did you feel sympathy for Jeff? Not empathy. Did you feel sympathy for Jeff? Did you feel sorry for him at any point during this show? As I said, I kind of waffled back and forth at certain points, all the way up until episode 5. When we got to episode 5, and I saw him take the deaf guy into his apartment. At that point, I lost all sympathy for Jeff. At that point, that's where he turned to strictly a predator, strictly a bad human being. I had nothing, no care, no sympathy at all for him after that point in time. And after that point in time, whatever happened to him would have happened to him. I wouldn't have cared. But up until that point, I did feel a little bit of sympathy because they portrayed him in a way that you kind of understood why he was doing some of the things that he was doing. And you felt bad for his circumstances. Like he was dealt a horrible hand from his parents. Bad genetics on both sides, horrible living situation, being abandoned at a time in your life where you really need your parents. I can't think that there's a time where you need your parents less, but those high school years are very important, as are the years when you're younger. And it seems like his life was in turmoil at home the entire time. And then he was just pretty much abandoned. And the show made it a point, and subsequent interviews I've seen have made it a point to say that Jeff was always looking for people to stay, and he wanted them to stay. And that was why he was trying to turn people into zombies, was that he wanted them to be alive and he wanted to interact with them to some degree, but he wanted them to not be able to leave. and he wanted to be able to control them. The mannequin that he stole was obviously what he wanted to make these actual people into. That mannequin that he laid on and that he stole from the store. They made it a point in the show and the way the show was edited to always show that sort of top down view where he was sort of like laying halfway on top of the body and sort of like cuddling with the body. And they first showed that with the mannequin. And the people that he murdered afterwards, he always looked like he was trying to do that same sort of thing with them. Now, how you go from that to eating them, that's a whole different story. And I don't even know how or why that was going down like that. Katie says, a little bit of sympathy when doing his work in the last episode. It was minuscule, though. I don't like anyone being killed, and they made it seem like he was changing his ways as much as he could. Yeah, the very end, it looked like he had accepted religion and that he believed in God and he was baptized. And you just have to wonder how much he was really changing at that point. Call me a skeptic, but I didn't buy it as much as some people might. Some people, I think, in general, see the good in people. Me, I see the good in people, but I also really see the bad. And I feel like if he had gotten out of prison without have being rehabilitated at all, which it didn't seem like he was, even though he was going to church and stuff, he was not getting any sort of psychiatric help. So say somehow he was able to be released. I believe that he would have eventually committed murders again. It's just something that was in him and he got off on it. And like he always liked to say, the compulsion took over. Yeah, like the compulsion was too much for him. And I don't think that was going to change at all. Obviously, too little too late, but they made that episode seem a bit more emotional towards him with his baptism. And it seemed he was being kinder to others, not so creepy. He was being kinder to others, but don't forget that he was also being a jerk to people too and playing up his getting fan mail and that he was a crazy person and setting the food, on the seat for the guy to sit on. Like, yeah, he was, as much as he might have seemed like he was trying to be kinder, he was still doing some stuff too. So I don't know if that was all before he got saved or what, but I don't know. I don't buy it. I don't buy it. I think that unless if you had told me that he had accepted God and had been saved and was also getting like intense psychiatric help, you might be able to sell me on the fact that he would be okay if he was able to be released. But outside of that, no way. No way. He was just going to go out there and be cool for 10 days, 10 months, 10 years, whatever. But he was going to relapse at some point and kill someone else, or at least try to kill someone else. I don't condone a single thing, but that episode did try to shine a tiny light on him being a more sympathetic person. Yeah. And it also seemed like he understood what he did and was willing to understood that he needed to be punished for the things that he did too. So yeah, too little too late. Thank you. I appreciate the applause. He was a jerk pre-baptism. Yeah. So before he got saved, I guess he was a jerk. And then maybe afterwards he had turned over a little bit of a new leaf, but I don't know. Either way, If you're watching right now, I appreciate you watching this character breakdown for Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer story. Please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell so that you're notified each and every time that we go live for more breakdowns, reactions, reviews of all the shows that you care about right here on Watch Stuff with Us. I'm JD. Peace.